Good morning. Why don't you get winding with me while we talk about my journey with crochet? Um, I don't do get ready with me because me getting ready is just putting clothes on. You can see there's no makeup here. But I have this floppy ball of yarn that I need to work with today to try to work out a new pattern. And I don't like it being a floppy ball of yarn, so we're going to wind it up. Winding it by hand is a labor of love, if you would. Truth is, I do have a little clamp-on crank winder if I wanted to use it, but frankly, it's more trouble than it's worth unless I am in a whole session of creating balls that I need to pack away. Like sometimes when I do festivals, normally when I do them, I'm doing 1 to 2 months of festivals. And what I'll do is I'll take the primary colors that I think I'm going to need or that I'm planning on using, and I will wind small cakes of them. That way I have inventory to work off of that I can just leave in my camp or in my booth and then not have to worry about transporting it back and forth every single weekend for 1 to 2 months. But in this case, when I start getting floppy yarn messes, instead of working it until it turns into barf, I go ahead and recake it. But again, unless I'm doing a whole lot of cakes, and I do like cake, unless I'm doing a whole lot of yarn cakes, just doing it by hand is perfectly acceptable for me. I tend to get a little preoccupied with exactly how the yarn lays when I do this, especially in the beginning. Once I get a bigger ball going, I generally don't care. But anyway, so let's talk about my journey with crochet. I think it was back in, it was 2018. So I had my kid in 2016. I got married in 2017, and we bought a house in 2018. Now, in 2018, prior to us buying the house, I have been asking friends of mine for years to help me learn how to crochet because specifically I wanted to be able to crochet dicks. Yes, that's what I said, male parts. Why? I don't know. Thought it'd be funny. But that is ultimately what got me into working with yarn as more than just braiding. Because before that I used to have a large yarn stash because I did hats and I did braids on the hats and who cares. But anyway, finally, after so many people said they would teach me and they would show me and we could get together and do it, and the we can get together and do it turns into we never end up making time to do it, or I don't have time or they don't have time, being an adult and having responsibilities. So finally I said screw it, got myself a crochet hook set, got myself some yarn, and found some YouTube tutorials. Because honestly, what's a pattern? I don't know patterns. I did buy some books that showed me different crochet stitches and then just never used them because the way they had them listed in the book I didn't understand. It did take me a while to learn that there is a difference between UK stitches and American stitches and the way they're written. Mostly coming into play when you get to half double crochet, treble crochet, because in American stitches, a half double crochet is what a UK double crochet is. So that was fun. But again, that's getting ahead of myself. The first thing I did was I made the wonkiest square and realized I hated it. I got better with my tension and everything. And then in 2018, I got sent to Colorado for work for 3 weeks, during which time we were actually closing on our house because the closing got pushed back. And unfortunately, my husband, who had broken his right hand fairly recently doing something stupid. What I mean by that is it was avoidable, and it was his fault that his hand got injured. Because I was going to be gone because the closing got pushed back due to something not being written in the contract correctly, I had to get a power of attorney so that while I was gone, he could sign the documents for me because I was going to be gone for 3 weeks. Well, that meant that he had to sign his name, which isn't short, but it's not long, and then had to sign my name included by agent of his name on every single document. And if you've never done the paperwork for the sale of a house, there's a lot of documents. I've had to do that paperwork before after my grandmother passed away and we were doing estate stuff, but I digress. So anyway, during this time, I went to Colorado. And during my trip to Colorado, I made a whole lot of nail parts out of yarn, and I was gluing googly eyes on them because that's funny. And they were about yay big, and I called them traveling Compeenions. And since then, I have refined that particular design. I have minimized it. They're now about this big, so half the size. And I actually created a pattern for them since then. But back then, I didn't have a pattern. So it was just a matter of, figuring out the magic ring, which is the bane of most crocheters' existence when they're first learning it. Because it's pain and there's 7,000 different ways to do it. And it's just a matter of what feels good to you. But I got that down. And then, not a knot. There we go. And then basically just, I would originally crochet, instead of doing the magic ring, I would crochet a square and then make a tube and then stitch it together, and then I would crochet the top around. And I did something similar for the dangly members at the bottom. Words I'm not going to say, but I learned increases and decreases that way, and how they worked and how they didn't work. And then later, when I taught myself how to read some patterns, I was like, okay, I actually was on the right track with my theory. I just wasn't quite executing it well. But again, since then, I have greatly refined the pattern for that. I've actually written the pattern. In fact, 99% of everything I make is not made with a pattern. Now, there are times I will use patterns. Usually when I'm trying to decide on the best way to do something new, I will try to find a pattern that has some element in it that I'm envisioning for whatever item I'm using. And I'll review that pattern and see how, see different ways that technique could be implemented to make the end result, right? And with that, I'll then use that pattern. I'll make that pattern real quick, or make that part of the pattern, see how I like it, see how I can modify it, and then scrap it entirely, start it from scratch, and then write it as I go. Because at that point, I understand the, not science behind it, but I understand the process behind making said image or concept or piece. My bats are a good example of that. I went through 3 or 4 different patterns before I came to how I wanted to include pieces from each of those patterns, or stitch patterns from those, and it worked out really well. I finally got a piece that I'm really happy with. And the same with the Compeenions. I went through about 3 or 4 different iterations. Originally I was doing big ones and small ones, and then I decided, what, screw it, the small ones are just fine. We scrapped the googly eyes and started putting safety eyes on them. And hopefully in the fairly near future, I will be making some cellophane wings so that I can then have flying fox. But look, it's a yarn ball. It took me like 8 minutes, 7 minutes, something like that. So I also did this one yesterday, and this one, and probably 3 or 4 more other ones over the course of this week, just because I've been crocheting, and that's how it goes. But yeah, so hey, look at that. We wound a ball. I talked about patterns. So that's what got me into crocheting in 2020. So 2 years later, when the world shut down, except for my husband and I are both still working our regular jobs because we were both essential, oil field and distribution. I worked for Amazon. I was screwed. Anyway, during that time, I taught myself the magic ring, which I had not previously been able to learn, and started making little balls, little balls, and would put cat ears and faces on them and little tails, and I just called them cat balls, and they were just stuffed with regular, like I destroyed a stuffy and used the stuffing out of it because I didn't have enough polyfill. And then later I destroyed a dog toy and pulled the squeaker out of it and made it squeak. And then at that point, now all of my chombies have squeakers in them. That's my signature now, is the squeakers. But then in 2021, I think, I was given the opportunity to vend them through a friend of mine, a booth that a friend of mine worked through at the festival, the Renaissance Festival. And that's where it started. And that person still, or that person doesn't work for that booth anymore, but that booth still carries my products at 2 different shows. And they actually purchase them from me wholesale now instead of selling them on consignment. So I've done really well for myself in that respect. And now anytime that I make other items and people find out that I'm the one that made them, they're very interested in taking a look and or purchasing them. So it's been a good little mini empire that I have built over the last, well, it's 2026, so 8 years from when I started crocheting. So it is possible. It's just a matter of finding the right person, place, and price point. And the price point is where I struggle on things. So thanks for anybody that supports me. And if you follow my Pirate Kitty Creations on Facebook, then you may see a picture of what I end up making if the pattern works out well today. So, bye.